Story Chapter 7. 3 ascetic monks and 3 young women of Baghdad. Your Majesty, during the reign of the Muslim king Harun-e-Rashid, in Baghdad there was a porter who, although it was a lowly and difficult job, still proved to be an intelligent and cheerful person. One morning, as usual, with a large basket next to him, standing in a public place, he waited to see if anyone needed his work. Suddenly a young woman with a slim body and veiled face came and gently told him, "Listen, porter, pick up the basket and follow me." The porter, very pleased with those gentle words, quickly put the basket on his head and followed. The young woman said softly, "Oh, lucky day. Oh, good day." First the young woman stopped in front of a closed door, raised her hand to knock. A dignified Christian with a long white beard opened the door. The young woman put some money in her hand. Him, without saying a word. But the old man knew what she wanted, went in and a moment later brought out a large jar of wine. "Take this jar," the young woman told the porter, "and put it in your basket." He did so and she continued walking. The porter followed behind and exclaimed again, "Oh, blessed day! Oh, what an unexpectedly happy day!" The young woman stopped in front of the fruit stall. She chose to buy all kinds of apples, peaches, plums, quince, lemons, oranges, myrtle, lilies, jasmine and many other flowers. And herbs. She told the porter to put everything in the basket and continue to follow her. Passing in front of the pork counter, she told him to weigh out 25 livres of the best meat. And the porter put it back in the basket. According to her orders. Going to another store, she bought maple buds, coriander, cucumbers and many other green vegetables, all soaked in vinegar. Going to another store, she bought peanuts, almonds, and chestnuts. 3 beans, almonds and many similar fruits. At another store she bought all kinds of almond jam. The porter put all those things in the basket, saw that it was full and told the young man, "Woman, madam, you should have warned me that when I buy a lot of things, I will bring a horse or rather a camel to carry it. If you buy any more, I won't be able to bear it." The young woman laughed at that joke, still telling the porter to carry a basket with her. She went to a spice shop to buy all kinds of perfumes and nails. Incense, nutmeg, pepper, ginger, a large piece of ambergris and many other Indian food flavorings. Made the porter's basket overflow. The young woman still told him to follow. They walked until they came to a splendid building whose facade was decorated with beautiful pillars and the door was inlaid with ivory. They stopped. The young woman knocked lightly on the door. Coming to this place, Scheherazade realized that it was dawn and stopped talking. "Sister, to be honest, the story has just begun and I find it very interesting," Dinarzade said. "I believe that the king will not miss the pleasure of hearing the next part." It is true that Shahryar not only did not order the queen to be executed, but also eagerly waited for the next night to see what would happen in the splendid building she had described. Dinarzade woke up before dawn and said to the queen, "My sister, if you are awake, please continue telling the story you started yesterday." Scheherazade then continued as follows. While the young woman and the porter waited for the door to open, this man was deep in thought. He was surprised. A mature woman like you saw that she continued to do her job. Product? Surely not a slave, with such a noble appearance, he must be a free person, a person of social status. He intended to ask questions to clarify the matter, but in the meantime then another young woman opened the door, and this young woman also had such a brilliant beauty that he was stunned and almost knocked over the basket full of things inside. He had never seen such beauty compared with the person standing in front of him. The young woman leading him along noticed the confusion going on in his mind and knew clearly the cause. She was so interested in observing the porter's bewildered look that she didn't notice. Saw that the door was open. "Hey, come in, will you?" The young woman opened the door and said, "What are you waiting for? Don't you see that the poor man's back is bent because of the heavy basket?" When she and her friend the porter went in, the young woman went out and closed the door, and the three of them, after passing through a beautiful lobby, entered a very large yard surrounded by corridors, connecting to equally large and extremely majestic rooms. Rule: at the end of the yard is a large, beautiful vault with an amber throne placed in the middle, supported by 4 ironwood pillars, all of which are inlaid with large diamonds and pearls and covered with red satin embroidered with beautiful gold thread. Carefully. In the middle of the yard, there is a large tank built of white marble, containing clear water released abundantly from the muzzle of a gilded bronze lion. The porter, even though he had to strain his back to carry the load, could not help but admire the beauty and cleanliness everywhere in this building. But the phenomenon that especially attracted his attention was the third young woman sitting on the throne, who was much more gorgeous than the second young woman. She walked down as soon as she saw the 2 young women returning. Looking at their behavior, he guessed that the mistress must be this third young woman, and he was not wrong. This young woman's name was Zobeide. The young woman who opened the door was Safi, and Amin was the young woman who had just returned from shopping. Zobeide said to the 2 young women as he approached them, "Children, don't you see that this good guy is rubbing his back under this basket full of things? What are you waiting for? If you don't help him, what are you waiting for?" Hearing this, Amin and Safi each took hold of one of the handles of the basket. Zobeide also put his hand on it, and all 3 of them gently placed the basket on the ground. They began to unpack the things inside. After finishing the work, the graceful Amin took out money to pay the porter. The dawn light, coming to this place, forced Scheherazade to stop talking, making not only Dinarlaid but also Shahryar feel disappointed. The emperor had to wait until the next night to continue listening. The next night, anxious to hear the next part of the story he had begun to tell, Dinarzaid woke up and said to the queen, "In the name of God, if you can't sleep any more, please tell me the story of 3 beautiful young women, what they did with all the things Amin bought. Then you will know." Scheherazade told her, "If you listen attentively." She told. And she continued to tell the story as follows. The porter, very satisfied with the money he was paid, instead of carrying the basket and leaving, he seemed hesitant and awkward. It felt like it was unexpected. He intended to ask to stay to admire the rare beauties and, in his opinion, equally graceful. Because Amin had also taken off her veil and he saw that she was as beautiful as the other 2 young women. What made him incomprehensible was that he could not see a single man in this building. Furthermore, most of the food he brought home, such as dried fruits and jams, is only suitable for people who like drinking and fun entertainment. At first, Zobeide thought the porter was still standing to rest, but seeing that he was staying too long, he asked, "What are you waiting for? Haven't you been paid in full?" "Hey," she told Amin, "please give him a little more to make him satisfied." "Madam," said the porter, "it's not that keeps me here, because the salary is more than worthy. I know it is not very polite of me to stay longer than necessary, but I hope you will forgive me if you see my surprise that not a single man with the three of you has extraordinary beauty. A group of all women without men is actually just as boring as a group of all men without women." He added to the above statement with many more funny details to prove what he said. He also did not forget to quote the saying that people often say in Baghdad, "Eating is not good if there are not 4 people," and he came to the conclusion that there are only 3 people here, you need 1. On Wednesday, the meal is really interesting. The young women laughed at the porter's reasoning. Then Zobaydah said to him sternly, "My friend, you were too curious. But, although I don't want to say much, I still need to let you know that we 3 sisters do our work secretly. No one can know. We have an important reason why we cannot reveal our private affairs to those who gossip." A famous author whose books we have read said this, "Keep your secret to yourself and do not reveal it to anyone. Whoever reveals it will no longer be in control of that secret." If your own stomach cannot keep your secret, how can the stomach of the person you trust with that secret be able to keep it? "Ladies," the porter said again, "just from your appearance, from the first moment of contact, I knew that you were rare and noble people and found that I was not mistaken. Even though fate does not give me enough wealth to elevate myself to a career above my current profession, I still constantly improve my knowledge by reading books about science and history and asking the ladies for their help. Let me say that I also read an author's maxim that I always practice on a regular basis. That is the sentence, 'We only keep secrets from those who are known to be snitches who take advantage of our trust. But we never hesitate to reveal them to those who are wise, prudent, because we know for sure that they will know how to keep it to themselves. Keeping a secret inside me will be absolutely as safe as leaving it in a room with a double-locked door and the key is lost.'" Zobaydah knew that this porter was quite smart, but let him know that he wanted to stay for the party they were about to hold. She smiled and said, "You know we're going to have a party, and you know we've had to spend a lot of money, so it's worth it. Otherwise, what if you also want to participate without contributing anything?" The beautiful girl Safi also joined her. "My friend, she told you to carry the load. Haven't you heard people often say, if you carry come something, you will be the one to stay with us. If you don't bring anything, then you should just leave empty-handed." The porter, even though he was a talker, would probably have retreated embarrassedly if Amin hadn't boldly stood up for him and said to Zobaydah and Safi, "Dear sisters, I beg you to allow him to stay with us. He will certainly make us happy. You see he has all the abilities like position. I can assure you that without his diligence, promptness and courage in following me, I would not have been able to buy so many things in such a short period of time. Besides, if I tell you all the sweet and polite words he said to me along the way, I'm sure you won't be surprised at how protective I am of him. Listen." As soon as Amin said the words, the porter was overjoyed, knelt down immediately, kissed the ground, where the beautiful woman's feet were, then stood up and said, "Dear lady, today you have started your happiness. For me, she multiplied it by a truly generous act. I can't express my gratitude enough. Also, ladies," he said to all 3 of them, "since you have done me a great honor, Please do not think me too abusive. I consider myself a person worthy of such honor. No, I always consider myself a lowly slave of the ladies." Having said that, he gave back the money he had received, but Zobeide solemnly told him to keep it. She said, "Everything what once left our hands to reward those who helped, will never return." The sun was shining at this exact moment, forcing Scheherazade to stop talking. Dinarzade was over. Listening attentively, he was very angry. But he calmed down as soon as the emperor, also curious to know what had happened between the three beautiful young women and the porter, told him to save the next part for the next night and stood there. "Go up and do your usual work." Dinarzade the next day, not missing waking the queen at the usual time and telling her, "My dear sister, it's almost time to wait for the morning, please tell me. Continue the thrilling story you left off last night?" Scheherazade spoke up and told the emperor, "Your Majesty, with your permission, I would like to satisfy my sister's curiosity." Then she continued to tell the story of the three monks. Islamic asceticism is as follows. So Zobeide did not want to take back the porter's wages, but she said, "Hey friend, I agree to let you stay and have fun with us, but I warn you. It is not enough that you must keep the secret, but we also want you to strictly observe the rules of politeness and honesty." Meanwhile, beautiful Amine took off her street clothes, tied the dye inside to her waist neatly and started setting the table. Much food was laid out and she placed many bottles of wine and golden cups on the dresser. After that, the young women sat at the table and let the porter sit next to them. This man felt indescribably satisfied because he saw that he was sitting at the same table with three wonderfully beautiful women. After a few appetizers, Amine sat next to the cabinet, picked up a bottle of wine, a cup, and poured the wine to drink first according to Arab custom. She poured it again, gave it to the sisters to drink in turn, then poured the fourth time into the same cup and gave it to the porter. This man took the cup, kissed Amine's hand, and before drinking, sang a song whose meaning was, "Like the wind carries with it the scent of fragrant places, it passes by like the cup. The wine he is about to drink will have a sweeter flavor than its natural taste from her hand." That song made the girls happy and they also sang along. Everyone was very happy during the meal, which lasted quite a long time and included many interesting games. The day was about to end. Safi told the porter on behalf of all three sisters, "Well, get up and go. It's time for you to leave." The porter didn't want to leave at all, saying, "Oh great. Where do you want to order me to go when I'm in this state? I got drunk from looking at the ladies and drinking their wine. I will never find my way home. Please let me stay one night to fully wake up. I can sleep anywhere, but it will take a while for me to return to the state I was in when I first came here. With all these conditions, I still doubt that the best part of me is still left here." Amine once again defended the porter. "Ladies," she said, "he is right. I agree with his suggestion. This guy made us so happy. If you believe me, or rather you love me as I often do, let us keep him here with us tonight." "Honey," said Zobeide, "we cannot refuse your request. The porter," she continued to talk to this guy, "we are happy to accept your request again. But there must be new conditions. No matter what we do that concerns us or anyone else, anything else in front of you, you must not open your mouth to ask us why. Because asking us questions about things that have nothing to do with you, You will likely have to listen to things that do not interest you. Be careful, don't be too curious about wanting to delve into the reasons for what we do. Madam, said the porter, I promise that I will strictly and precisely comply with that condition, so that you will not have to bother and blame me and will never have to punish me for gossiping. The tongue. I, in this case, will lie still and motionless, and my eyes will be like a mirror that does not contain anything it reflects. Let me show you, Zobeide said again with a serious look. What I ask of you is not something we just asked. Please stand up and come read what is written above this door inside. The porter walked up to the door and read the words written in large gilded letters. Whoever says things that have nothing to do with him will hear things that are not good. He returned to the three young women and said, Ladies, I swear that you will never hear me say anything that has nothing to do with you, and that is what you care about. Having agreed, Amin laid out the dinner, and after lighting many candles laced with incense and musk, which emitted a pleasant fragrance, illuminating the room, she sat down at the table with her sisters and brothers. Porter Guy. They began to eat, drink, sing and recite poetry again. The young women took pleasure in getting him drunk under the pretense of drinking for everyone's health. Good words are given without any hesitation. They were all rejoicing in a rare joy when they suddenly heard a knock on the door. Here Scheherazade had to stop because she saw that it was already morning. Emperor, there is no doubt that the next part of this story it wasn't worth listening to, so he decided to wait until the next day and stand up. At the end of the next night, Dinarzade called to the queen. In the name of God, if you don't sleep anymore, continue telling me the story. About three beautiful young women. I am anxious to know who knocked on their door. You will find out soon, said Scheherazade. I can assure you that what I will tell you later will not come to pass. It's not worthy of the attention of the king, my lord. Hearing the knock on the door, she continued, all three young women immediately stood up and went to open the door. But Safi, who was used to this, was quicker. The other two saw that they were being overtaken, so they stopped and waited for Safi to come back and tell them who could have any business to come so late. Safi returned to announce, Ladies, there is a chance to spend a fun night, and if you have the same thought as me, we should not miss it. Right now there are 3 Muslim ascetics in front of our gate, I suppose based on their clothes. But there is one detail that must surprise you. All 3 of them have one eye on the right side, and their hair, beard, and eyebrows are all shaven. They said they had just set foot in Baghdad for the first time today, and because it was already night, they didn't know where to stay, so they knocked on our door. They asked us, out of love for God, to open our hearts and reach out to them, to let them sleep overnight even if we had to stay in the stable. They are all young and healthy and seem quite intelligent, but I can't help but laugh when I look at their funny and similar faces. Tell me, Safi stopped and burst into laughter, making the other 2 young women and even the porter unable to hold back their laughter. Big sister and sister Safi continued, we should let them in, sister and brother. With the people you just described, there's no reason why we shouldn't end the evening even more happily than we started it. They will give us great pleasure without any significant disturbance. They only asked to stay overnight and would leave early in the morning. Zobeide and Amin were very hesitant, finding it difficult to accept Safi's wishes, and the reason why was clear to Safi himself. But seeing that this girl expressed her sincere desire for approval, the two could not bear to refuse. "Okay," Zobeide told her, "let them in. But don't forget to tell them not to ask about anything that doesn't concern you, and let them read the sentence written on the door." Having received this, Safi happily went to open the door and immediately returned, followed by 3 Muslim monks. The 3 monks entered, bowed solemnly and bowed to the ladies who had then stood up to welcome the guests, welcomed them and expressed their pleasure to help them relieve their fatigue after their long walk. Finally, the girls invited all 3 to sit down next to them. The splendor of the room and the gentle politeness of the young women made the 3 monks secretly admire the beautiful female owners. But before sitting down on the chair, accidentally glancing at the porter, dressed almost like the monks of a different order, with beard and eyebrows not shaved like them, one of the 3 said, "Looks like this is one of our fellow Arab rebels." The porter's eyes were half closed and the alcohol was still rising in his head. Hearing that, he felt dissatisfied, didn't bother to stand up, proudly looked at the 3 monks and said, "Hey, you guys, please sit down and don't talk. Meddle in trivial matters. Haven't you read the sentence written on the door? Don't force people to live your way. Joining the family must be according to custom." "Hey buddy," the monk who made the initial comment said, "please don't be hasty. We are sorry that there have been some shortcomings for you. On the contrary, right now we are ready to listen to your advice." The argument could have lasted longer, but the young women intervened and skillfully reconciled it. When the monks sat at the table, the girls served them food and Safi especially happily poured wine for them. At this point, Scheherazade stopped because it was just dawn. The emperor also stood up and went to set the table. The court silently said he would listen again the next day because he really wanted to know why these monks had one eye and all 3 had one eye. 1 hour before dawn, Dinarzade woke up and said to the queen, "My dear sister, if you don't sleep anymore, please tell me what will happen between the 3 young women and the 3 Muslim monks." "Please," said Scheherazade. And she continued to tell the story of the night. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, the 3 monks expressed their wish to entertain the party by playing music if they had musical instruments available and were willing to let someone bring them out. The 3 young women happily accepted. The beautiful Safi stood up to look for musical instruments and a moment later brought a local flute, another Persian flute and a Basque drum. Each monk chose something from the beauty's hand and all 3 began to play a tune. The young women all knew the lyrics to this song, a very happy tune that blended into their lyrics. But sometimes they burst out laughing because the lyrics of the song are so funny. The fun was at its climax and everyone was extremely excited when they heard a knock on the door. Safil stopped singing to see what was going on. "But, Your Majesty, first we need to tell you why someone knocked on the door of the 3 young women's house so late at night. The reason is because Emperor Harun al-Rashid has a habit of traveling late at night to see for himself how the law and order situation is in the capital and whether any chaos is occurring. That night, the emperor left early in the evening, accompanied by Giafar, the prime minister, and Mesroor, the chief eunuch of the palace. All 3 people were disguised as merchants. When passing through the street where the 3 young women's mansion was located, the king heard the sound of instruments, singing and bursts of laughter, so he told the prime minister, "Hey, You should knock on the door of the house that is making noise. Let's see. I want to go in and see the reason." The Prime Minister tried his best to explain that it was the young women holding a party that night and that the alcohol must be rising to their heads, so don't be foolish enough to come in and get caught up in those unkind words, and it's not even time to ban. Don't disturb their fun. But Emperor Harun al-Rashid still said, "Never mind, come knock on the door. I give you an order." So, to no avail, Prime Minister Ja'far had to knock on the door of the young women's house, obeying the king's orders not to reveal his identity. Safi opened the door and the vizier, in the light of the candle she held in her hand, saw a woman of great beauty. He played his role very well, bowed low and politely said, "Madam, 3 of us merchants from Mosul, 1, have been here for 10 days with a lot of expensive goods in the warehouse. A farm where we temporarily stayed. Today we were invited by a businessman to visit his house and we were treated to a hearty meal. He called a group of female dancers to dance and sing jubilantly. It was late at night and the group of people were so happy they were causing a ruckus in the streets, so a patrolman passed by and forced them to open the door. Some people were arrested, but we were lucky enough to climb over the low wall and escape." But the Prime Minister continued, "Because we were strangers and still drunk, we staggered for fear of bumping into another patrol group or the same group before returning to the farm, which was quite far away. Besides, if you come back at night, it will be useless because the gate is closed and will only open in the morning, no matter what happens. So, ma'am, when we passed by here and heard the sound of music and singing, we guessed that the party had not yet ended, so we boldly knocked on the door and asked to stay for the night. If you think we are worthy of being allowed to join in the fun, we will try our best to make up for the time interrupted by us. If this is not possible, just ask for temporary shelter under the eaves of the house to avoid the wind and dew overnight." While Ja'far spoke, the beautiful Safi had time to look at the vizier and his 2 companions, whom he said were also merchants like himself. Looking at their faces and posture, guessing that they were not ordinary people, Sfle told them that she was not the boss. Just wait a little, she would come back to give them an answer to their request. Safi returns to present to Zobaydah and Amin. They hesitated for a moment, not knowing how to resolve it. But they were good-natured people and allowed the 3 monks to stay. So they decided to let the 3 merchants into the house. Scheherazade wanted to continue, but saw that it was already dawn, so she stopped. The number of new characters that the Queen had just introduced into the story had aroused curiosity. Shahryar's words made him wait for some unexpected incident to happen. The king was so excited that he had to leave for the next night. Dinarzade, just as curious as the emperor, wanted to know what it would happen when the king entered the 3 young women's house and did not forget to wake the queen up very early. "If you are no longer sleeping," she told her, "then I ask you to continue telling the story of the monks." So Scheherazade, with the emperor's permission, continued thus. The king, his prime minister and the chief eunuch, brought in by the beautiful Safi, bowed to the young ladies and the monks very respectfully. Polite. The young women also welcomed them in the same way, and Zobaydah, taking it as the eldest sister with a solemnity befitting her position, said to them, "Congratulations, gentlemen, but first, if you don't mind, we would like to make a request." Bridge. What is your request, ma'am? The king asked, "Can anyone deny anything to beautiful ladies like you? You should only use your eyes to look, but let your tongue rest. Don't ask anything about what you see. Don't inquire about the cause, and don't gossip about things that have nothing to do with you, otherwise you'll hear negative words." Atrium. "We will comply, ma'am. We are neither judges nor curious gossips. Just paying attention to what concerns you is enough. But there's no point in meddling in other people's matters." When the Prime Minister finished speaking, everyone happily sat down, resumed the conversation and began to drink wine for the new guests. While Prime Minister Giafar questioned the young women, the Emperor continuously admired their extraordinary beauty, grace and intelligence. On the other hand, he was also extremely surprised at how the monks, all three of them, had one right eye. He really wanted to know the reason for this abnormality, but the conditions that were given to him and his group made him stop. Along with those thoughts, then looking at the luxurious furniture, the harmonious arrangement and the extremely cleanliness of the building, he could not help but suspect that there must be some magic going on here. The conversation turned to entertainment and fun ways. The monks stood up and danced to their own rhythm, which was warmly applauded by the ladies and won the esteem of the emperor and his peers. Go! When the monks finished dancing, Zobeide stood up, grabbed Amin's hand and said, "Stand up. Surely everyone here won't laugh at us for not being constrained at all. And the presence of all of you is not an obstacle to the work we still do." Amin, understanding what she wanted to say, stood up to collect the dishes, bottles, cups, and put away the table and musical instruments that the monks had just played again. Safi also did not stand idle. She swept the house, rearranged all the messy furniture, removed the wicks of the candles, and added incense and dragonfly to the furnace. Having finished, she asked the three monks to sit on a sofa on one side and the king and his men sat on another sofa on the other side. As for the porter, she said, "Get up, and help us with something we are about to do. A man like you, whom we consider family, shouldn't sit around like that." The porter had a little too much to drink, quickly stood up, and after tying the hem of his dye to his waist, "I'm ready," he said. "What's the matter?" "Very good," Safi said. "Wait a minute and you will understand. You won't have to sit on your hands for long." A moment later, Amin came out with a chair and placed it in the middle of the room. Then she walked to a door, raised her hand to open it and signaled the porter to come closer. "Come here," she said, "and help me." He obeyed, went in with her and a moment later came out leading two black female dogs with a leash attached to each dog's collar. The two dogs looked like they had been beaten a lot with whips. The porter led the two animals to the middle of the room. Zobeide was sitting among the monks and the king immediately stood up and went to the porter. "Come on," she said with a sigh, "let us do our duty." She lifted her shirt up to her elbow and took the whip Safi gave her, telling the porter, "Give one to Amin, and bring the other one here to me." The porter obeyed and as he approached Zobeide, the dog he was leading began to whine and raise its head to look at Zobeide with a pleading expression. But Zobeide calmly pretended not to see the bitch's pitiful look and moans, raised his hand and slammed the whip at her body until she no longer had any strength left before throwing the whip to the ground. Then he grabbed the chain in the porter's hand, lifted the dog's front legs up. The person and the animal looked at each other's sad, emotional faces and both cried. Finally Zobeide took out his handkerchief, wiped the dog's tears, kissed it and gave the chain to the porter. "Take it, return it to its place and bring the other one here to me." The porter carried the beaten dog into the inner room. When he returned, he grabbed the second dog's leash from Amin's hand and brought it to Zobeide, who was standing still. "Keep it like the one just now," she told the porter. Then she picked up the whip again and swung it down like the first one. "Then cry with it, wipe its tears and give it back to the porter." This time, Amin personally led this second female dog into the inner room. The 3 Muslim ascetics, the king and 2 of his men, were extremely surprised at that scene. They could not understand why Zobeide, after severely beating 2 female dogs, which according to Islam were dirty animals, then cried with them, wiped their tears and kissed them too. They whispered to each other. Especially the king, most anxious to know the reason for such an extremely strange action, constantly signaled to the prime minister to ask about the situation. But the prime minister turned his head to the other side until he saw the king continuing to gesture urgently, so he had to signal and reply that at this time he could not satisfy the king's curiosity. Zobeide sat in place for a long time in the middle of the room as if to regain strength after vigorously whipping the 2 female black dogs. "My dear sister," the beautiful Safi told her, "please return to your original place, so that it is my turn to do the task." "Okay," Zobeide replied. Then she came and sat on the trap. On her right were the king, his vizier Giafar, and his chief eunuch Mesrour. On the left are 3 monks and a porter. At this point, Scheherazade said, "Your Majesty, what you just heard must have seemed strange, but the next part of the story is even more strange. I'm sure you'd like to hear more tomorrow night if you allow me to finish the story." The emperor agreed and stood up because it was already morning. Dinarzade had just woken up and quickly called out to her, "Sister, if you don't sleep anymore, then tell me the very beautiful story of yesterday." The queen remembered the part she had finished telling the night before, turned to the emperor and continued as follows. "Your Majesty, after Zobeide returning to their seats, everyone was silent for a moment. Finally, Sfle, sitting on a chair in the middle of the room, said to Amin, 'My dear, please stand up, you know what I want to say.' Amin stood up and walked to another room with 2 female black dogs. She returned holding a bag covered in gold satin embroidered with brocade and lined with blue silk. She walked up to Safi and opened the bag, took out a guitar and gave it to her. Safi took it and after tuning the strings, she began to play. Following the rhythm of the instrument, she sang a song that expressed the torment of being away and was so inspiring that the emperor and everyone else listened passionately. "Milk." She played and sang passionately while dancing gracefully to the rhythm. After finishing the song, she said to Amin, "Hey honey, I'm tired and my voice is lost. Please replace me with the piano and sing for you." "Yes, I'd be very happy," Amin replied, walking up to Safi to receive the instrument from her hand and take on the task of replacing her. Amin tried out the piano and then began to strum and sing for a long time like her sister about the same topic but more enthusiastically, and she was very moved, or rather, absorbed the meaning of the lyrics so deeply that after performing she was exhausted. Zobeide wanted to show his satisfaction and told his sister, "Honey, you have created a miracle. Everyone clearly saw that I was in my own pain, so I described it vividly. Amin had no time to respond to that honesty. She felt her chest was so suffocated that she just wanted to open her shirt to let it breathe, but with this gesture she revealed her chest and a breast that was not the white and smooth skin that a beautiful young woman like Amin must have. On the contrary, her chest was full of scars, making everyone scared. Opening her shirt to let her breathe in like that didn't wake her up, and she still fainted. But, Your Majesty, I didn't notice that it was already morning. Ms. Scheherazade stopped speaking and the Emperor stood up. This king was hesitating, not knowing what to decide. Out of curiosity, he also wanted to hear the last part of the story full of interesting and unexpected details. Dinarzade, out of habit, said to Queen, "My dear sister, if you don't sleep anymore, please finish telling the story of the young women and the Muslim monks." Scheherazade continued to tell the story as follows. While Zobeide and Safi ran to save helping her sister, one of the monks complained, "We would rather lie outside than come in here and have to see these scenes." The king heard it, walked closer to him and the other monks and asked, "What is all that about?" The monk who had just complained replied, "Sir, we don't know any more than you do." "What?" The king said, "Are you not members of this family? And you can't tell us either. Know anything about the 2 female black dogs that were brutally abused and that woman who fainted?" "Sir," all 3 monks said in unison, "we just came to this mansion for the first time in our lives, and arrived just a moment before you." This further increased the king's surprise. Maybe the king judged, does the other person, sitting with you, know anything? A monk signaled the porter to come closer and asked him if he knew why the 2 female black dogs were lost and why Amin's breasts were so withered and scarred. "Sir," replied the porter, "I swear by heaven and earth that if you don't know anything about this scene, then neither do I. It is true that I reside in this capital, but today is the first time I have entered this house, and if you are surprised to see me here, I am equally surprised to find myself joining you." What surprised me even more was that I didn't see a man with the ladies. The emperor, his companions and the monks believed that the porter was a member of the young women's family, so they hoped that through him they could learn the things they needed to understand, but were disappointed. The emperor decided to satisfy his curiosity at all costs, telling everyone, "Listen here, we have a total of 7 men here and only have to deal with 3 women. Why don't we force them to clarify the things we need to know? If they are not willing to respond, is there any way we can force them to talk?" Prime Minister Giafar did not agree with the above opinion and raised the consequences of doing so to the emperor. He chose to speak like a businessman speaking to someone of the same profession. "Sir," he said, "please think. We need to preserve our honor. We all know under what conditions these ladies agreed to receive us at home, and we accepted. What will people say if their commitment is reneged on? It's even more blameworthy if something harmful happens because of that. It doesn't seem like these women are asking us for that promise, so they can feel remorse if we break it." At this point, the Prime Minister pulled the Emperor a little away and said softly, "Your Majesty, it will soon be overnight, please. Be patient. I will arrest these women tomorrow morning and lead them till they come before the throne, and he will know everything he wants to know about them." Even though that advice was extremely reasonable, the emperor still rejected it, forced the prime minister to stay silent, and told him that he wanted to clarify the situation right now. "It's just a matter of who will be the spokesperson. The emperor tried to force the monks to speak first, but they all excused themselves. Finally, they agreed that the porter should do it. He was about to ask this fatal question when Zobeide, after having revived Amin, walked up to them. Because she heard them discussing loudly and enthusiastically, she asked, "What are you guys discussing? Do you have any objections?" The porter immediately spoke up. "Ma'am, we would like you to please tell us why, after torturing the 2 female black dogs, you cried with them, and why you fainted. That has a chest full of scars. That is, ma'am, what I have been authorized to ask you." Zobeide heard that, with a proud look turned towards the emperor, and the whole group of people following him along with the ascetic monks, coldly asked, "Gentlemen, is it true that you have commissioned him to ask questions?" "Ask me that." All answered that it was true, except Prime Minister Giafar, who said nothing. Hearing that confirmation, she told them in a voice that clearly showed her displeasure because she felt insulted, "Before agreeing to receive you at your request, and to guard against anything that could harm us, I am not pleased with you because we are only women." Therefore, the condition was set that they should not whisper about things that had nothing to do with them, for fear of hearing unpleasant words. "After being welcomed and entertained as politely as we could, you broke your promise. That's partly our fault for being too lenient. But as for them, it is impossible to forgive. Their behavior is not proper at all." Having finished speaking, she stomped her feet and clapped her hands 3 times, then shouted loudly, "Come here quickly. Hurry up." Immediately a door opened wide and 7 strong black slaves walked in, swords in hand, each grabbed a guest, pushed him to the ground, dragged him to the middle of the room, preparing to chop him. Head of all 7 people. It is easy to understand how terrified the emperor was. He regretted, but it was too late, that he did not listen to the prime minister's advice. While the poor king, Giafar, Mesroor, the porter and the monks were about to pay with their lives for their deplorable curiosity, one of the slaves asked Zobeide and his sisters, "Noble, powerful and respectable ladies, are you commanding us to behead them?" "Wait." Zobeide replied, "First of all, we still have to ask them." "Madam," the porter stammered tremblingly, "in the name of God, please do not make me die for someone else's crime. I am innocent, they are the culprits." "Alas!" he cried and continued, "How much fun we had. It was these one-eyed monks who were the cause of the disaster. There was no city that did not suffer ruin before these inhuman people. Madam, I beg you not to confuse the first with the last and think that forgiving a miserable person like me, who doesn't know who to rely on, is more beautiful than using authority to torture and be a victim." Gave birth to his anger. Zobeide, although angry, could not suppress a chuckle at the porter's cries. But without stopping before him, she asked the others a second time, "Please answer and tell me who you are. You only have a moment to live. I cannot believe that you are decent people nor people of authority or honor in your country, no matter what country it is. Because if that were true, you would know how to restrain yourself and respect us more." The emperor, impatient by nature, suffered more than the others because he saw that his life and death depended on the orders of an offended and justly angry woman. But he began to feel a glimmer of hope when she expressed that she wanted to know each person's identity before giving the order to kill them. He believed that she would not allow him to be killed when she knew his position. So he whispered to the prime minister next to him to immediately declare to her who he was. But the wise and prudent Prime Minister, wanting to save his master's honor and not wanting to spread the great humiliation that the king had brought upon him, only replied, "We must suffer what we deserve." Not obeying the emperor's orders, he wanted to speak, but Zobeide asked the ascetic monks. When she saw that all three of them had one eye, she asked if they were brothers. One person answered for all three, "No, ma'am, we are not blood brothers but just fellow believers. That is, we follow the same lifestyle." She asked one person in particular, "Are you born one-eyed?" "No, ma'am," this guy replied, "I got one-eyed because of a very strange incident that would be useful if recorded. After that disaster, I shaved my beard and eyebrows and became a monk. Asceticism is like the clothes I am wearing." Zobeide also asked the other two monks the same thing, and they answered the same as the first person. But one person added, "So that you understand, ma'am, we are not ordinary people, and so that you can have some respect, let me tell you that all three of us are the king's children. Even though we only knew each other this afternoon, but we introduced ourselves to each other, and we can assure you that our fathers are all famous kings in the world." Hearing those words, Zobeide calmed down his anger a bit and told the slaves, "Give them a little freedom, but you still have to stay here. If anyone tells us clearly their background and the reason why they came here, we will not treat them badly and will let them go wherever they want. But we will not forgive those who refuse to do what we ask." Here Scheherazade stopped talking, and that silence along with the dawn light made Shahryar understand that the time had come. He had to stand up. The emperor silently promised to continue listening to Scheherazade's story tomorrow because he really wanted to know what the three monks were like. Dinarzade was extremely interested in the stories told by the queen. Waking her at the end of the next night, "My dear sister," she said to Queen Scheherazade, "if you no longer want to sleep, then continue telling the beautiful story about the monks." Scheherazade asked for the emperor's approval, and when it was approved, she continued, "Your Majesty, the three monks, the king, the vizier Giafar, the eunuch Mesrour and the porter all sat on the chair. A carpet in the middle of the room, opposite three beautiful women sitting on top, and behind them were black slaves ready to carry out their master's orders. The porter understood that he only needed to tell the true story about himself in detail to be able to free himself from the great danger that was threatening his life, so he spoke first. "Ma'am, you know my identity well. And what was the reason that led me to the monastery? So my story will soon end. Your ladyship hired me this morning at the laborers' gathering place as a porter. I followed her to a wine store, a fruit and vegetable store, and then to a dry store that sold almonds, pecans, chestnuts, and many other fruits. Then we went to a store that sold spices and candies. From this store, the basket was full of shakes. I had to try my best to carry it back to the lady's mansion, and they were kind enough to let me stay from then until now. It was a favor that I will not forget for the rest of my life. That's all my story." When the porter finished speaking, Zobeide told him with satisfaction, "Now go, run. Don't let us see you again." "Madam," the porter said again, "please allow me to stay. It is unfair that after making everyone interested in hearing my story, I do not have the pleasure of hearing everyone's story." Having finished speaking, he sat down in a corner, happy to have escaped a danger that had made him so frightened. Behind him, one of the three monks spoke to Zobeide, whom he considered to be the master of the three young women and the one who ordered him to tell his story. He began to tell it as follows. Thank you for joining us for today's fairy tale. We hope these stories bring joy and meaning to your day. If you love our channel, please hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any exciting tales. Wishing you a good night and sweet dreams. See you in the next story.